Ministry of Health and the wider healthcare sector. So as part of my job, I work with clinicians and various public healthcare institutions, hospital, community or care organizations, and try to solve some of the most pressing problems of our time. And of course, in the past year, it has been COVID-19, which has led to a huge surge in need for more scalable technology in the healthcare space. So in the past year, I've built, together with the team, a vaccination appointment system for our vaccination rollout in Singapore, some of your ART registration systems, the COVID-19 management backbone, which stores all your data, which the TT apps pull from, as well as various other peacetime projects that aren't quite in the public, in the wild yet, products like Sync, which are data sharing and consent giving platforms. So this is one of my hats in product development, and the other hat as deputy director, I basically try to push for policy changes that create more space for us to build high quality products. Outside of work, I co-founded, I'm not a CEO, actually, COO, I think there's a typo there, of Better.sg. It's a volunteer-run nonprofit organization, and we have about 1,000 volunteers from different sectors, different disciplines. And the common thing that binds these volunteers is that they like to use technology to improve society. It could be different causes, from animal rights all the way to inequality or to healthcare. And what we do is we provide free open source products as well as subscription funding for subscriptions to different digital tools so that we can supercharge our volunteers' work. Yeah, so that's a short 2-minute introduction about me. Should I hand the time over to Elwyn too?
Thanks, Chilling. Next up, we have Elwyn Tan, Senior Software Engineer at Open Government Products.
I have to say that's a pretty comprehensive self-introduction that Chilling made. The bar is pretty high, so I'll try my best. So for what it's worth, as has been introduced, I am indeed a software engineer at OGP. I am coming up to close to 5 years, basically spending the time working on various products. So right now I kind of work on AskGov, which is basically a repository of Q&A questions and answers for your everyday kind of questions. So things like at least we aspire to doing things, answering questions like what your BTO options are, or what do you have to do at CPF at a certain point in your life, things like that. In addition to that, we're currently running a month-long hackathon right now, trying to find products, and my particular hackathon product would be dealing with online petitions, basically trying to see how we can take advantage of people's desires to effect change by hosting official online petition repository. Still currently in the prototype stage, still trying to figure out like how where the fit would be and so on and so forth. But we do hope that in the long run, this we are onto something. Other products I've kind of worked on include GoGovSG, which is the government's official link shortener, FormSG, which is a form builder for public officers with a lot of a comprehensive list of features, including SyncPass integration and so on and so forth. And a lot of other products that I'm struggling to remember right now, because 5 years I suppose is a very long time. Okay, I do see that like you guys have listed MockPass as part of the things I've done. So that was kind of that was also something I kind of did on the side for as part of my work. Prior to this, I worked in the private sector, so I did a lot of mostly working in investment banks, building tools and components for the trading desk, financial controllers, and you know, everybody else who might want to be who is interested in being part of institutional finance. I am indeed quite a regular contributor to open source software. I did a lot more in my younger days compared to now. But you know, if you do follow me on GitHub, and you probably would see me occasionally working on various GitHub repositories that I kind of resonate with. So that's probably a very quick rundown of like what I do. So
Thanks, Elwyn. That's certainly a lot of things that you have done, and it's very impactful to Singaporeans, especially. We are really looking forward to the products that you are coming out with in the future as well. Okay, so right now I'm going to show, this is the link to our Slido where y'all can send in your Q&A questions. Yeah, so just go and scan it. And the link is also posted in our Zoom chat right now, so y'all can access it. Just feel free to send in your questions there. Okay, so moving on. Let me just start with a question to kickstart our fireside chat. So Chilling and Elwyn, could you all share one thing that you all really like about working at OGP, and how is it like as compared to your previous working experiences, like in the private sector for Elwyn and in other ministries and PMO for Chilling? Yeah, Elwyn, would you like to start first?
I was about to say ladies first, but certainly I'm happy to humor that question. I think the time that I've kind of spent here and looking back was pretty much in line with what was kind of told to me when I first got to know about the team. So I actually joined. I actually got to know about OGP's forerunners when it was part of the data science division through a friend of a friend who happened to work there. And I think what was very prominent in the conversations that I had with him, as well as other people who kind of worked in that team, was this sense of mission in the hallways, right? This idea that like we are empowered to do to actually build and manipulate technology, and we have this purpose and drive to try to use this to directly impact members of the public, and it kind of really stood out for me because up to then I kind of thought myself, okay, you know, I'm a decent enough engineer, and I'd be happy to try to push for change in any way that I find myself. So working in the finance sector, what I kept telling myself was that even if more or less it kind of just involves the processing and handling of large amounts of money and all financial instruments, there was still some indirect impact, right? So like the bank's clients could have been sovereign wealth funds or pension funds and that sort of thing, right? But seeing how these people kind of more directly influenced how things would work in Singapore, right? That was really attractive to me. And I guess that eventually persuaded me to join them as part of the team. And I think looking back, that sense of mission in the hallways continues to ring true for all of us here today at OGP. So to answer your question, that's the sense of mission is probably something that that has kind of stood out for me. And this and you know, that's a very marked contrast to like what I used to be doing in the private sector. There are other things, but I'm sure you know those will surface through the course of this evening. Chilling, what about you? What's the difference between you know, now and back then?
Thank you. Well, my background, I did spend some time in the private sector, you know, before I joined government. Brief stint. I must say something that's really unique about being in government, and especially being in a modern tech outfit within government, is that your problem space is a lot bigger. So in my previous stint in private sector, I think it was very slightly more narrow. I was looking at, you know, maybe privacy regulation, as well as you know, in the economic consulting space, how do you help certain companies make more profits? And to me, in public sector, the bottom line is less clear because it's a lot more varied, right? What is good? The definition of good can extend from you know, are people happy, or it could be, are people getting good healthcare, getting good education, or is our public transport working well and efficiently? The definition of success and good is more multivariate, slightly harder to measure, but it also makes problem solving a lot more interesting. So for example, we could build more data centers in Singapore, but what's the trade-off in terms of carbon footprints from a in the government, you get to sort of contend with some of these trade-offs. And when you build technology, we get to, I think beyond a specific domain. Let's say if you're working in private sector, it could be that you're just working on payments or like on fintech. Here you sort of get a whole suite of domains that you can access, from healthcare to education to public utilities, all the way to even defense, right? I think OGP did a number of projects with the Singapore Police Force, and have products to fight scams. So in terms of the breadth of domains that I've managed to access in OGP and in public service, it's been relatively much broader. There's also quite a lot of room to go really deep in public service. And OGP in particular, we go deep in building products, meaning building products that people love to use. If you look at across all products, not a single product is actually mandatory for anybody to use. And I guess one difference between like the OGP way and maybe working in regular ministries is that we don't mandate anything, right? We don't mandate that our users use Postman or users use forms. Users use it because they love the product or they find it useful. So when I say go deep, you have the capacity and room to go deep. It's in unlocking what makes for really good products that people would voluntarily use. One thing I love about working in OGP specifically is in open-ended ownership. Because you have access to so many different domains, you can think about a problem from multiple perspectives and angles. For example, a healthcare problem may not be necessarily a healthcare problem only, right? It could have to do with how social workers or maybe inequality or social conditions of the family, right? So in thinking about how technology can help, there is a lot of room to just traverse and think beyond a limited domain and find creative solutions to solve the problems at hand. So in vaccination rollout, I think when the team was toying around solutions on how we could enable seniors who are not digitally savvy to book appointments, we've also had to be very, very creative. We ended up actually getting a whole group of volunteers to go door-to-door knocking and supplying them with the tech tools to make appointments for seniors easily. So I think open-ended ownership, accessing a wide array of domains has been some of the things that stood out for me.
Okay, thanks, Elwyn and Chilling. I think it's really interesting that how open government products like what you'll come up with are not compulsory, but there's a lot of willingness from people or like organizations to take out what you create. It really shows that there's a lot of value in what you are doing. And it's something that really has a lot of purpose, as Elwyn has talked about initially. Yeah, so on that note, actually, I would like to ask, how do you balance between convenience and security? As Chilling has mentioned previously, you all worked with SPF for like scams and things like that, right? So in creating products that are very intuitive and easy for the user to use, how do you make sure that security is something that's also being prioritized on, especially with the amount of scams that you see recently? Yeah. Would Chilling like to start now?
Yeah, sure. It's a very timely question because, like, I think especially today we were just sort of discussing within the team about this. I don't think there's strictly a trade-off between security and convenience. It's not always the case that you have to choose one over the other. I think in the case of scams, fundamentally, it's about how do you empower people and educate people to click on only like, legitimate websites, government websites, and give them a way to tell the difference between what is legitimate source versus what are spoofs or what are scams. So from the fighting scams perspective, it's a mix of educating the public and giving them tools like Scam Shield. It's a product that our team has built in the past 2 years to block scam calls and scam SMSs. So when we think about, Scam Shield is fundamentally about making it very convenient for people to block scams and incentivizing the public to report scams so that collectively we are all more inoculated, right, from scams, and the police force can selectively block messages that people report as scams. So in this case, actually, they're not trade-offs. We are making them completely aligned by making it super easy and convenient for people to report scams. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I think that there is quite a bit to unpack here. So, in terms, I guess implicit in this question is whether we can actually build some, whether we have to choose something that's like super convenient, but as a result we kind of gloss over certain procedures that we have to do, and or whether we build a product that is considered secure and which can be trusted to actually handle sensitive data, but maybe onerous to use, right? I think, like Chilling, there are ways and means to kind of work around both, right? So we do take a couple of approaches, and maybe if you would humor me, I'll try to expound on these, right? So one of these is product scoping, right? So if you were to look at several of the products that we built, we try to scope it down so that we don't actually worry about the fact that we might be handling sensitive data in the first place. So the prime examples of these would be things like GoGov SG, which is just a mapping of short links to long links. It's nothing particularly sensitive about that. Even Parking SG, right, which kind of handles parking sessions, right? Probably the most sensitive part of the of what we store there is the license plate numbers, right? So if we just hold on to that, right, and don't avoid storing anything else, suddenly you don't have to worry so much about security, because it's just license plate numbers, right? We don't have to it's not a big a deal if somebody were to find out about where somebody's parking at a given point in time, because they can probably just go down to the car park and observe the car placed there, right? So that's product scoping, trying to figure out like how we can work a product so that we don't have to worry so much about security. The other way is to basically employ novel use of cryptography, right? So I think a prime example of this within OGP would be Form SG, right? So your form submissions are sensitive. So one way we can kind of try to handle such submissions is to basically go with prevailing government policies of the time and build out the infrastructure needed to hold these submissions, which would have been considered secure, but in terms of the logistics needed to build something up like that, it's pretty heavy, pretty onerous, and probably not something that we want to go down. So what we did instead is to employ end-to-end encryption. We used public key cryptography so that even if we were to hold the submissions on the public cloud, they are encrypted at rest. And in fact, they are transmitted in encrypted form over the wire. So even in the event of a compromise or intercept, unless the malicious actor has access to a quantum computer, or somehow, God forbid, the access to the private key, they won't be able to actually decrypt the response. So yeah, so those are the kind of like hopefully kind of explains how we try to balance this idea of like convenience and security in a way that that kind of gives rise to viable implementations and applications that people actually want to use.
Yeah, thanks, Elwyn and Chilling. I think this really explains why people are willing to take up your products, because of its security and its ease of use, which is something that users are looking for. And on that note about products, someone in Slido has asked about the roles between a product manager as well as a software engineer. And since both of you are working at OGP, maybe we could get some insights about how product managers and software engineers work together for products. Yeah.
Ladies first.
Sure. Well, product managers, I think I see them as like entrepreneurs, right, for the product. Not just for the product, but for the problem. So given a problem, you take full ownership of getting the team, the resources, the tools needed, or the environment even to crack that problem, right? And that has to do with forming a team. How do you get the right people on the team? How do you make sure that the team works well together? The designers communicate well with the engineers, communicate well with the product ops folks, and creating processes on a day-to-day basis to enable that to happen. So this could be like, for example, setting up the right Slack pings to make sure everyone attends meetings at time on time. It could be about having a prioritization tracker on GitHub and making sure that the features that are due for release are scheduled in a sane way and delivered on time. It could be about managing stakeholders who and making sure that you create the space for your product vision to be realized. So instead of doing what stakeholders want you to do, it could be convincing and helping stakeholders understand why a product vision is designed in a certain way, but also being willing to be proven wrong. Right? You could have a certain vision, but perhaps during user testing, you realize that that's not working out, or that's not how users behave. And then we will have to pivot, change how we design a product perhaps, or even change the product strategy entirely. So very much as a product manager, you are end-to-end accountable and responsible for the success of the product. Yeah, and we of course work super closely with engineers.
Yeah, I think it really certainly has to happen. So like I think maybe what I've actually found very satisfying in OGP is the fact that like the PMs, the designers, the engineers, we all kind of have a stake in it, because partly because like we all kind of want to see something take shape. We want to try to deliver some public impact in one form or another, and what that exactly looks like really is pretty much born out of like the some of the deliberate, sometimes even agonizing conversations that we'll have with one another as in our respective disciplines. So in OGP, a lot of our PMs tend to be are expected to have a bit of technical aptitude, and that would actually really facilitate that that discussion between a PM and an engineer, and even with the designers who we try to get them to cross train and actually go for a boot camp so that they actually understand some tenets of engineering. Engineers, for our part, even though our focus is pretty much on architecture and some of the more technical aspects of building a stack, right? There is this I think there is this norm that like we try to articulate all these things in terms that like that everybody else would understand. So there is this thing where we will actually sit together and the engineers would try to go in patiently go through how things work and how everything kind of fits together, so that like so that everybody has a very clear picture as to what's going on. And let's see. Yeah, and I think this is important because there's just so few of us, and there is a lot of problems out there to solve, and there is a lot of people out there to try to hustle and persuade. And I think in order for this to work out, everybody pretty much has to chip in. So sometimes that might also mean that like the engineering needs to have some design sympathy, or even in my case, stand in for the PM for product management, because we don't have a product manager in our product, right? So so those hopefully kind of gives you a flavor of like what the level of collaboration is like between amongst people within OGP across our roles. And it also makes me wish I kind of mentioned this during the career fair earlier today to the people that I was talking to, but that's another story. So.
Thanks for sharing about how product managers and software engineers work together in the workplace. I think it's something that a lot of us are interested in, since many of us are looking forward to pursuing such paths. And I think this will be very beneficial when deciding what exactly do we want to work as when we graduate. And so let me just ask another question. Since open government products, you all create products that's not exactly compulsory for people to use. So definitely user feedback is something that's very critical. So how do you all take user feedback into consideration once a product is released, and since you always have new projects ongoing, who are those that are going to continue to update and maintain such products as you have more and more projects in the future as OGP continues to grow? Yeah.
So I think there are effectively two questions here, right? How do we deal with user feedback off the back of of launch, right? Or maybe even during the prototype phase, and what is the long-term what are the long-term roadmaps for like the products that are currently in flight? I'll take on the first question. Maybe I'll leave Chilling to take on the first question. Although maybe I'll try to attack it at some point. But maybe if you don't mind, I'll answer the second question first. We don't really have a very good answer for this. So I think part of the part of the challenges that we face is that yes, indeed we do quite a large range of products, and quite frankly, we do have more products than we have engineers for. So part of the challenge is trying to figure out what's going to happen when a product coasts. In most cases, what happens is we basically leave it to drift. Maybe we'll draft half an engineer onto it, and we try to document, right? On the basis that hopefully the product is well scoped. It requires not too much maintenance, and with the documentation that we have in place, somebody can actually jump in and quickly make changes as needed. So at least that's the theory. In practice, that's kind of happened with at least Parking SG and a couple of like other projects within OGP. It's not a very satisfactory answer because it does mean that we don't necessarily always have somebody watching the product all the time, right? Compared to like say a product in active development. But thankfully that has been mitigated to a great degree by the way we kind of plan our products and scope our products down so that it isn't too complex a product, and at least it's still easily understood within a given amount of time. Now, with regard to user feedback, I guess we take it regularly, we take it willingly, and against that we kind of figure out like where we want to how that influences the product roadmap. If it's something that we think can be easily incorporated, we'll accede to that. If we are sufficiently persuaded that this is actually worth doing, that would certainly be something we consider. Although time and resources are also factors that we need to consider when we decide to take something on. Chilling, you might have to help me out here because I'm not a product manager, and you probably have a better insight into this.
Oh no, I think you're doing a great job. I mean, engineers actually handle a lot of product tickets, so they do hear directly from our users. That's one of the beauty of working in OGP. It's really pretty much like all hands on deck. Engineers are not disconnected with the end user. I think end users' feedback is really valued by all the product teams in OGP. They keep us honest in many ways. And there are many channels that feedback usually come in, right? The most obvious would be your support tickets on a product support page. But that aside, it could come from members of public calling in. It could come from members of public writing on Reddit that the appointments booking system, let's say, is glitching, right? Yeah. Sometimes it's a pretty leading indicator of whether our products are working. We actually like actively scan Reddit threads sometimes for the more some of our national rollouts. Newspaper forums, people discuss it online, Facebook messages. They come from all sorts of avenues, and we take them very seriously. We don't necessarily, like Elwyn mentioned, there is a process, right, for deciding whether a feedback should translate into a feature or an enhancement or improvement to the product. Sometimes users encounter problems that it has nothing to do with the product, how the product is designed, but it speaks to a more fundamental, let's say, policy issue, right? And I think that's where it gets interesting, and where technology, the intersection of technology and policy comes into play, where you have feedback, and because you're so close to the citizen, you don't just hear product feedback, you hear where the system is broken, right? Or you hear about where there's communication misalignment, maybe the circular or the newspaper media announcement is not accurate or doesn't reflect policy, or policy is too complicated or complex for people to understand. An example, I think, is during COVID. There was, I think Elwyn actually made a dine-in checker because it was really hard for people to understand who gets to dine in, and who cannot dine in. At some point, the rules were quite complicated and complex. So we built a product, a checker, to help people decide, understand that.
Yeah, actually, that Chilling, is there anything else you want to say? Because
I was going to actually say that, like, in this case, the feedback was really essential, not just from a product development perspective, but in simplifying policy. Because one of the follow-ups, I think, that was quite important, was not just that we fixed our product, was that we did also, make some headway in changing the policy and simplifying it.
Yeah. So actually, I think Chilling kind of brought up an interesting story I kind of like to share. So yes, for those of you who are in the know, we have a first checker that kind of tells you whether you can dine in or not. And I kind of was the guy behind it, and I kind of did it on a whim because partly because in the morning I kind of checked my LinkedIn, and there was basically some person who basically built a spreadsheet that kind of contained the business logic of like whether you can or can't check in. And I was like, that looks interesting. Let me see whether I can convert that into an eligibility checker. So, and because we had checked first, we could easily kind of whip something up and just present it as a web form. And it's kind of surprisingly took a life of its own beyond my wildest imagination. I'm probably exaggerating, but I can't find a better turn of phrase. It was quite rapidly shared amongst members of the public, and I was quite surprised. I was like, guys, it's just a dine-in checker, right? What I mean, I realize the rules are complicated, but there's no need to get too excited about it. So so that was, I think, maybe one instance where we did get a response from the public concerning something that we kind of put together, and off the back of that, I guess the teams who were working on COVID at the time were able to take advantage of that to try to convey certain points to the task force.
Yeah, so I think what you all mentioned is really key to the success that OGP is having. As Chilling mentioned, the engineers are very hands-on. It's very pertinent, as your products are very intuitive and easy to use, and it's something that is catered for what the people want and what they really need. Even though it may seem like a very small thing, but it really is like the ease of use is really critical for people. And I think the quality of the products that you'll come out with will really shine as you'll make sure that it's relatively fast, free, and light on maintenance. As you'll embark on new projects, your current existing projects will continue to function well and suit the needs of the people. And I think what's very, very impressive is that you are very open to feedback from Facebook or Reddit, such sources, which really helps you all to connect with the people, which I think is something that's very crucial, especially for the public sector. Yeah. So moving on, do you have any tips for students who are looking forward to join the public sector in the future? Some values.
Yeah. Before we launch into that, I think I kind of want to riff off a point you kind of made about like us being very accepting of the feedback that we get. I mean, after all, we are public officers. Our mission is to serve the public, right? So it is only right that we give some form of response to the information that we are getting, or the opinions that we're kind of getting from the public, because in the end, this is who we serve as a government, right? So so there is certainly that sentiment amongst ourselves as we go about our routine. As to what kind of sorry, can you rephrase your question again, because I kind of lost myself.
Like my next question was any advice for students who are intending to join the public service? Yeah.
I can't say I'm an expert on it. I mean, Chilling certainly spent more time in the service than I have, but I would like to think that if you were to consider a career in the public sector, don't lose sight of who you effectively serve, because for one reason or another, it's there may be process put in your line of work as a public service officer, and some of these reasons can be very good, right? It kind of holds the government accountable to the public whom it serves, right? But it all that said, right, don't lose sight of the fact that somebody at the receiving end of what you're trying to do is a member of the public, right? He will be your fellow, in effect, he will be your fellow man, right? And you have to do right by the person. I mean, so I'll pause for a few moments to try to figure out more things to say, but Chilling, if you could.
Yeah, certainly. Advice for people joining the public sector. I think the first is understand or take some time to think about what you uniquely bring to the public service, because I think that would help you find the space or the right spots within the service, which is a huge place, right? Joining public service from an OGP perspective is very different from joining public service. Let's say if you are a policy officer serving in a ministry, they are pretty different roles. So taking some time to think about what you are interested in doing and what you uniquely bring to the organization is maybe a first step to understanding where you can best fit and deliver the most impact. I think people who thrive in public service and really love what they're doing are those who has achieved some sort of alignment between what they bring to the service and what the service needs. And what the service needs is a function also of what the citizens need, right? So starting from there, I think could be a good thing to do for yourself if you're thinking about joining public service. The second thing is that public service, given how large it is, there are really different pockets, and the environments are quite different. The OGP's culture is quite different from maybe a regular ministry's culture. It's quite different from a stat board or maybe a municipal office, let's say. So think about where in public service you want to contribute in, or best fits your skill set. And I think dig deep into the problem space that you are interested in. Again, serving the citizen is very broad. Right? You can serve a citizen by being a teacher. You can serve a citizen by being maybe a really good person in allocating budget and doing finance. You can serve citizens in building products. Right? So what is your theory of your personal and unique theory of change of being in public sector? And if you dig deep into that question, I think you have a better chance of finding a right fit or the right domain to spend your time and energy in. Yeah.
I think maybe slightly related to what Chilling just said, and maybe slightly related to one of the questions on Slido. I think it's useful to actually like examine yourself and say, what do you truly care about, right? Is there something out there that you would have a passion for, and if so, does it concern the public good, right? Does it concern making life better for society at large? And so those are the things that would probably stand you in good stead as you embark on a career in either OGP, Graphtech, public service, what have you.
Thank you. I think that's really interesting and inspirational, like showing that y'all have a purpose in what y'all want to achieve in the public sector. And I think this is really what drives you all to do good every day and contribute towards society and create products that people are really interested in. So now I think I'm going to move over to Slido, as Elwyn talked about just now. Yeah, let's refresh this a bit. Yeah, so one of the question is, what is the difference between OGP and the rest of Graphtech, as OGP was originally from Graphtech, right?
Yeah.
And you all were part of the starting team.
Yeah. For the record, this was by far the most popular question in the career fair, and I basically had to repeat myself like 4 to 5 times because safe distancing measures mean that I can only address 2 people at any given point in time. But here we are. The question posed again. So OGP is basically a subsidiary, or rather a division within Graphtech. We are in effect the experimental arm. The experiment, namely being, can we run a government technology division as if it's a startup, as if it's a big tech company? And if so, what are the benefits and drawbacks of doing so? So in that sense, we a lot of our operations tend to be independent and separate from Graphtech. So we actually have our own people ops team. We have our own marketing and comms outreach. The way we kind of handle technical interviews is very distinct from Graphtech, and even say our salary levels and our career schema is actually quite unique in the government, if not within Graphtech alone. So and I think the idea here is that by trying to take a different approach, or at least approach more familiar to Silicon Valley, to building products and to running an organization, the lessons that we can learn and the failures that we have, and maybe even the successes that we have, if we are fortunate enough, would actually be lessons that we can convey to Graphtech, who would then be able to carefully consider whether they want to propagate to the agency. And maybe if these lessons are really worth some value, then maybe what we learn can actually be propagated to the rest of government, and hopefully that kind of brings about some interesting change with how the government goes about technology, or maybe even how the government runs. So on a day-to-day basis, we kind of run like a startup incubator within Graphtech, within the government. So like a lot of the products that we kind of come up with are pretty much self-sourced, proposed through like our conversations and correspondence with like other agencies, our friends, colleagues in other parts of government, and so on and so forth. Graphtech kind of sort of does that kind of thing too, but it's a lot more isolated. It's in very tiny pockets. I think OGP is probably the only place where you have the safe space to kind of you do this experimentation part kind of thing as part of your work routine. And Graphtech, for its part, would tend to work on like very large, broad projects that might be part of like an overall strategy set by its senior leadership, or they will take commissions from other government agencies. So like maybe Enterprise Singapore would say, "Hey, build the business grants portal," and they would basically then Graphtech in response would field a 15-man team to kind of tackle that scope of a project. Jieling, I've said a lot. I don't know what else there is to cover.
Yeah, I think you pretty much covered most. Maybe I could share a bit about product philosophy. There's some difference, say, between OGP and rest of Graphtech in how we think about products. I think a lot of the products we build primarily are like generic, modular, and composable products that can that don't serve a particular use case. So we seldom custom build products for a particular problem. We try to build tools that serve needs across a wider range of problems. There are some certain cases where we do custom build components, but our general product philosophy is to build a suite of modular composable products. I think, and the reason why, it's not that I think OGP draws a distinction between itself and the rest of Graphtech. In fact, we work very closely with other parts of Graphtech as well. In many innovative organizations, there is a practice of coming up with in-house experimental units, right? Because it is sometimes difficult to challenge yourself or challenge your own assumptions from within. It helps to have an experimental unit that sort of plays a contestation sort of function within the same organization. So you sort of disrupt yourself before you get disrupted by external forces, or before it gets too late. I think there is some practical merits in having a standalone unit that's experimental in nature. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, it's really interesting seeing how OGP is the new experimental arm that is able to have more flexibility, I would assume, in the projects that you are pursuing and creating value for the people. And I think this would lead to the next question. As there's a as people think that there's a lot of bureaucratic red tape when it comes to the public sector as compared to the private sector, then it'll be pretty interesting to see a comparison for the roles of a software engineer and product manager for the public sector and the private sector.
Yeah, Chilling, I think you've seen more than your fair share of bureaucracy in your time as a career public officer. So I would like to hear about this.
Yeah, I think the first thing I probably want to challenge is the assumption that public sector is necessarily more bureaucratic than private sector. From what I have heard from friends who work in private sector and also in my own stints prior to joining public sector, it's not absolutely true that you get less red tape in private sector. It depends. It depends. Like maybe you get less of that in a startup just by necessity and it's smaller. But if you look at large organizations, generally red tape comes about because organization has scale beyond a certain size where you require processes to regulate behavior. So I don't think it's unique to public sector. So I think that's the first thing I'll say. Second is, whenever we see red tape, I think instead of shying away from it and sort of avoiding it, we see that as an opportunity. At least personally, I see that as an opportunity to see, okay, well, here's an obstacle. How do we go about it? Like, are there workarounds? Or can we think about workflows or new ways of achieving the same outcome without those red tape or even changing fundamental processes that drive the government today? So navigating, I think, involves also an element of changing. And if you approach problems in that way, they are not hard blockers that you can't change or can't navigate. So seeing that as a challenge in and of itself and embracing it, I think is one approach that I personally take. And it's actually pretty fun cutting red tape. I mean, if you approach that in that spirit. Yeah.
I would like to add a little bit of color to what Chilling said, and yeah, in the private sector is a very big place, and some industries are more heavily regulated than others. So and I happen to used to work in one of those industries. Finance tends to be under very heavy regulation by necessity. So you have your financial your financial market watchdog, MAS in Singapore, perhaps the Federal Reserve in the US and the Bank of England in the UK, and well, not the Bank of England, but doesn't matter. So by necessity, the regulation that is really, really heavy, so that like you ensure that like whatever you're doing is above board and does right by the client. Yeah, I guess to cut a long story short, it's not necessarily true that like private sector would certainly be more freewheeling compared to the public sector. As a matter of fact, when I first joined Graphtech, I did feel that things were a lot more ad hoc, a lot more straightforward compared to like where I used to be. But then maybe that's partly because the financial sector has to comply with a lot of things lah. So yeah, there are lots of questions. So hopefully we'll have enough time to get through all of them. So.
Okay, so thank you. So it really shows that it's not necessarily true that bureaucracy is more in the public sector as compared to the private sector. The private sector is a really large place, and it really depends on where you work at. And seems like there's a start question. Yeah, so I think this is a bit controversial, but
oh yes, it's okay. OGP's existence has always been controversial, so yeah, no stranger here.
You want to take that, or
yeah, yeah, but I guess somebody has to read out the question first, right? So
okay.
Yeah. I'll do it. This person posted, I interned in Graphtech. My manager expressed annoyance that the project was snatched up by OGP. So how does OGP manage these conflicting issues? And maybe I'll reframe this question a little bit as well. How does OGP and Graphtech handle these conflicting issues? It's true, there are several instances where what OGP kind of does may end up having significant overlap with, say, a similar project by Government Digital Services, which is another division within Graphtech. In fact, the core of the software engineers within the agency. And I think what we found is there is even though there's overlap, there are different priorities from the respective teams. Sometimes when it comes to figuring out what the product focus should be for a given use case, and there will be instances where the focus that OGP chooses would actually be relevant, and there'll be and likewise there will be instances where what GDS chooses for to go into their product would actually make more sense. So it really there is scope for like two products to coexist, where maybe where it doesn't make so much sense to actually coexist. It really is our responsibility between OGP and GDS to actually figure out like which product should go, which should stay, and so on and so forth. And I think there have been a lot of conversations amongst ourselves on several occasions as to like when one product when we feel that one product should be favored over another. So it's not an easy question. It's not an easy question, and I don't think we can satisfactorily answer this, and we certainly have to regularly deal with this on a regular basis. So yeah.
It certainly makes sense when it comes to products, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, like especially when you're in the public sector, where you need to it's public resources, and you really need to make sure that you get the best product out. So
sure,
if OGP has the most suitable stuff, then yeah,
it
certainly makes sense.
I certainly don't think that we are such a killjoy to try to rain on people's parade by coming crashing in with our own implementation of a product. I think overlap sometimes happens just by pure accident, and yeah, I there have certainly been instances where we've decided, okay, it doesn't really make sense because this team is kind of working on a product already, so maybe let's go find something else to do. If we do go in, we probably have very good reason as to why, and and maybe we are very convicted about what we about how we go about solving the challenge that the product hopes to address. So yeah.
I think maybe another way to think about this also is that maybe to also challenge the assumption that necessarily you should only have one form of, or one expression of an idea within government. So in private sector and in most, even in academia, right? Openness requires us to have different expressions of the same idea. Sometimes it could be a single idea, but implemented in different ways, and it helps us learn in different ways. Maybe one works better than the other, or like we could find different ways of improving products generally. And I think having monopoly over a single idea or single form of expression may not be very healthy. Yeah, so I think conflict, the key is in how we handle it, right? I don't think we should avoid it or just say, okay, let's just make sure that there's only one team implementing that one idea. Yeah, I think what I would love to see personally is maybe a more productive focus around outcomes. So sure, there are maybe two different products doing the same thing, trying to crack the same problem. How are they performing? What are the outcomes? And then what do we learn from the process? And I think that would be a more productive question.
I think on a related note, I'm just gonna quickly answer one of the questions which is like tangentially related. Check1st is not a rules engine. You can try using it as a rules engine, but I think you might be very, very dissatisfied with how it works. It's mostly a tool to build eligibility checkers more than anything else. I mean, yeah, the core is somewhat like a rules engine which you can use to evaluate stuff, but I don't think that's the intent of its use. But yeah, I'm not very familiar with Service SG, so it'll be unfair for me to comment on like on to compare and contrast. So
thank you. then let's move on to the perspective that OGP is elitist. Like, I certainly don't think so. From your checking Facebook, Reddit, and developing products, I certainly think that y'all are very in sync with the people's needs. But yeah, y'all can share your opinions on this.
Yeah, sure. Maybe if I start first, because I think I should really put my reputation on the line here. I think there is this sense that like we try to do how should I phrase this? There is this sense that like our engineers are highly capable. The people that we actually bring in are quite what's the phrase? Have very, very heavy credentials at their disposal. And just to try to illustrate this, right? I am actually lurking on the Singapore Comski Discord. A shout out to the people who maintain it. It's actually quite a fun place to be in. There is I think one kind of message that kind of caught our attention one fine day was somebody saying that they looked through the people listing within OGP's LinkedIn page, and then they felt that like they felt very, very inadequate compared to like everybody else, even the interns who are currently interning at OGP. And I think maybe that's partly because of the way that we kind of assess and hire people. And I would be first to admit that like that our process is really, really rigorous. And having academic credentials is not enough. We probably have to have like quite a fair bit of experience even coming into the interview room, whether it's through internships or like side projects and that sort of thing. And yeah, it's like 2 technical interviews, including like coding exercises, the final interview with the director of OGP. That's also technical in nature, and it can I guess in the face of that, what we've kind of observed is that there are people that would fit certain demographics that kind of come through. So a lot of them would have probably had like internships within FANG or even or kind of like work on some crazy GitHub projects in their own spare time. So in that sense, in terms of like the kind of people who come in, kind of people that you might come across in OGP, yes, they are very capable. I'm sorry that it kind of sometimes might look as if it's quite elitist, but yeah, I don't think that really is the intent here, because if that really is the case, then we have certainly failed as an organization, because one of the things that we need as we go about serving the public is humility, right? If without humility, we may end up being blind to the needs of people that we don't notice.
Yeah, I think to add on to what Elwyn said, we don't just look for capability and competency in our interviews. In fact, something that we value very, very highly is values. What kind of values do our candidates bring in to the organization? How much do they care about the public sector mission or about the needs of our citizens? And how much of and how is that demonstrated? Not it's not enough, I guess, to just show up in an interview room and say, yeah, I care a lot about public sector mission, but what have you done perhaps in your capacity as a volunteer, or how do you demonstrate that through the work or past internships or past schoolwork that you've done? And we look out for that demonstrated values, not just spoken. I think that is definitely something we value a great deal.
Yeah, I see a comment in the Slido coming up, and thank you for that clarity about this idea of elitism. Yeah, I suppose like a lot of the things that you've kind of pointed out, like OGP having a separate pay scheme, a separate office from Graphtech, and marketing itself as like kind of like an independent autonomous unit. I think that is part of the parameters that we have kind of gotten for ourselves, so that Graphtech can actually try to run this experiment, as it were. And I'm off the back of that, yeah, I can see why it can be construed as elitist, but I think that never was the intention. I don't think Graphtech wanted to create an elite unit, as it were. And again, I'm really sorry that it kind of turned out this way. And if this continues, I think that's certainly something that we might have to take back and actually think about in terms of like how we portray ourselves and stuff. So yeah. But for the record, Graphtech does have offices like elsewhere. So there are satellite offices in, say, the Ministry of Manpower. MOE has ESTL, which is actually also an experimental unit within the ministry, started by NUS's most famous Ben Leong. I think JTC also has a detachment of Graphtech offices as well. So yeah, this idea of like separate offices from Graphtech, I guess why OGP ended up being like, oh, separate officer, therefore must be elitist. That's probably something we need to go think about lah. So, but thanks again for the clarity to whoever posted that.
Okay, so more questions. Internships. Will OGP start to offer more internship roles like data analysts or engineers or like product management? Yeah.
Yeah, I'll take this one because I seem to have a finger on recruiting quite a bit. Yeah. I'm afraid to say that we don't actually offer internships in those roles, and that's partly because of the way we are, mostly because of the way we're structured. We do have some data science capabilities, but we only have like one data scientist, and we have a few engineers who kind of have some aptitude for data science, but that's pretty much it. Data science as a whole is not really a priority for OGP at this point in time. We do have ScamShield, which does have heavy use of NLP, but that's probably as far as it goes. With regards to product management, I think OGP is of the opinion that it really should be a role that is fulfilled by somebody who has a prior experience in a related discipline such as design or engineering. And so on that note, I would kind of push back on the notion that product management is a non-technical role to answer another question within Q&A further down, right? So in that sense, I think it might be a bit fruitless for us to actually have a product management intern, because like half the time the person might actually have to try to figure out both like the technical aspects as well as like say the softer aspects of it, like say stakeholder management and that sort of thing. So yeah.
So that's it for internship. Then what about outsourcing? Somebody said SingPass is not made by Graphtech.
Well, yeah, I'll quickly jump in and say OGP does not outsource anything. Graphtech, well, sorry, Chili, that's yours.
So I think SingPass was a product by Graphtech, not so much OGP. And I think there's a long history to this in terms of like, how SingPass started, which I'm not awfully familiar with. So
I am, so
maybe Elwyn.
Okay, hand off. Yeah. Okay, cool. So so Graphtech is kind of responsible for SingPass, but whoever wrote this is right to point out that that yes, indeed, SingPass was actually built by a contractor, or in commons in local parlance, systems integrator or vendor or what have you. So if my memory is right, it started in 2003. It was a system basically built by Crimson Logic, and I think in effect, it kind of functioned as a SAML provider. So in the bad old days of XML, that's kind of what passes for identity, provision of identity. 3 years down the road, I think Crimson Logic handed over the project to Accenture, who then went on to build, to maintain SingPass, and went on to build MyInfo and CorpPass. So that kind of gives you a good history as to why Graphtech kind of does this. I think this is quite prevalent of how historically the government kind of approached IT projects. They would say, well, the focus of the government and a government agency is governing, right? Not so much handling IT infrastructure. So and that's not my strong suit. So ergo, I want to focus on governing, and so therefore I want to get a contractor to kind of build out the IT infrastructure so that I can so that we can play to our strong suits, as it were. I think that perception is certainly changing. So that it's certainly the reason why OGP continues to be a going concern. And it also explains why I think as of now we've got maybe 500 to 600 software engineers in GDS, and even more engineers scattered throughout the rest of Graphtech. So there is this slow wind change where I think the government is starting to realize it's important that we take control and take ownership of the IT infrastructure that we are responsible for. So because whether we like it or not, technology would actually form part of our approach to governance. And you probably see that in private sector as well, where people start to realize that it's a capability, right? It's not a cost, it's not just a chore. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so we'll be taking like 2 more questions.
Sure.
Yeah. So another person asked, I don't think I can make it to OGP, but I'm interested in OGP initiatives like Hack for Public Good. So how can I contribute to Tech for Public Good?
Well,
Any
try
opinions?
anyway, like you might be pleasantly surprised. Who knows? Yeah, we do have a lot of initiatives. One is, apart from Hack for Public Good, is OpenJoe. OpenJoe is we try to recruit basically users and citizens to provide us with feedback on products, or even like pain points that citizens would encounter that we may not be aware of. So that's a very practical way that you can contribute as a citizen to Tech for Public Good. But also stay tuned. I think periodically we will roll out certain events, be it talks, fireside chats like these, but with other tech practitioners as well. And of course our annual hackathon. Yeah, stay tuned, on LinkedIn, Facebook, and perhaps one of these days we'll see you in our office.
Chilling, talk up Better SG, man. You're COO there. You really should stay talking that up. I mean, that's Tech for Public Good too, right? So yeah.
Totally. Thanks for reminding me of that. I sort of I'm wearing my OGP hat tonight. Very true. Better.sg. I don't know how many of you have heard of the outfit. It's something that I do outside of my work, and absolutely wonderful community of people who are all very interested in Tech for Public Good. And the way we come together is either in particular projects. So we start tech projects, where we build digital tools, and some of the products we've launched are like 2BU. It's an interactive fiction storytelling platform. There are also other projects that we have done, like Call Home, where we help foreign workers call home to their foreign countries, their country of origin, by supplying them with heavily discounted minutes for IDD calls. And we also have a consultancy arm where we work with the VWOs and not-for-profit organizations, understand the pain points and provide a different lens to the problems that they are facing. Sometimes we actually build solutions and tools out of that consulting process. As an example, one of my colleagues, Oliver, actually also a Better.sg volunteer, has been working on an attendance taking system for youth centers around Singapore. So really exciting stuff in Better.sg. And if you're curious and interested, would highly encourage you to check out our website, Better.sg, and you sign in from there and you hear from us.
I realize we're kind of overrunning, but I just want to quickly answer that question. So in terms of contributing to Tech for Public Good, we do have a GitHub organization where we publish most of our open source stuff. So I've kind of put a link into the chat, so feel free to visit that. And yeah, feel free to look at the code, understand what it does, and make a contribution. Maybe you might learn a thing or two as to how we approach engineering, right? And hopefully that answers both the question that Chilling was answering, as well as another question I think further down about accepting open source contributions. Chilling has also posted a link for Better SG, so hopefully that kind of you can leap off and go explore.
Yeah, so certainly there's a lot of avenues to contribute to Tech for Public Good, as you all have heard from our speakers. So one last question. Since OGP build products that target many Singaporeans, how exactly do you all get the product out and promote it and convince Singaporeans to use something new?
Yeah, I think the example I can think of is the vaccination rollout, because it is one product that we have to target everybody, right? It's very, very rare that when we are building products, we have to, your user group it is defined as everybody. Typically, we're like, okay, we're building for maybe citizens that are in this subsector, right? How we get this out and convince the masses to use it is fundamentally understanding what they need and making sure that our product addresses that need. We don't really convince in the sense that we persuade them to use through suasion, but we persuade them through how we design the product. For example, making it super easy for them to book an appointment. Or sometimes it also entails like training of volunteers to help seniors book appointments. So we think of creative solutions for the people that is hard to reach as well. It also means that we can't take a one-size-fits-all kind of approach. Yeah.
Sometimes hustling for your product really is the approach that you have to take in order to get traction, right? It certainly was the case for FormSG. I think Leonard was the product manager at the time for FormSG, and he had to do a lot of walking around and a lot of talking to agencies before finally somebody humored him to use the form for pigeon counting, amongst other things. But it kind of slowly went from there, and now we're pretty much the de facto option for building out electronic forms for government. So yeah, sometimes it's just a lot of elbow grease.
Yeah, thanks for sharing how you got it to work and how it's not very easy to get people to accept something new, but you need perseverance and your product needs to be good then people will be more willing to accept it. So now it's about 18. So I guess our speakers, do you all have any words of advice to share for our students, or any motivational quotes or stuff to share?
Yeah, I'm going to take advantage of that and try to answer one more question on Slido on the way out, because I think it's quite an important question to address. So the question is about like academic credentials and how much weight it carries in OGP, especially in terms of your career trajectory. I know there's this notion within government that that actually is kind of what determines your future. Or at least your pathway as in the public service. As far as we are concerned, it carries close to no weight at all, right? It's we really focus on what you are capable of, right? And what you've kind of learned and how you have developed as an engineer over time, right? So that really is how career progression kind of happens within OGP, right? We do have schemas that kind of talk about like where you stand at a given point in time, and if you're kind of performing at those levels, then yeah, sure, we'll move you forward. So on that note, your credentials don't really matter too much to me, right? What I'm looking out for is like, are you capable, right? Are you able to build something? Do you actually care about like how about delivering these things for the benefit of Singapore, right? And in that vein, I've kind of happily spoken to and entertained applications from people from private universities, right? Similarly, we've turned away people who are government scholars. So hopefully you may not be discouraged wherever, regardless of what your academic credentials are, because really what matters more is the person.
Yeah, I just want to echo what Elwyn said. I think that's really very core to our DNA in OGP. As for sort of parting words, and not really advice, but sort of just what I learned over the past few years of my career, is that I think one of the biggest or best predictors of your success and happiness at work is whether you're working on something you really care about, something that would kick you out of bed in the morning, even though you're hungover or you're just super tired. But like it's that one thing that you care enough about to get you up in the morning, or get you through late nights, which sometimes I inevitably encounter. So to find that and see if public sector makes sense for you, but definitely start with that question about what do you really care about, and I think you won't stray too far from where you want to be. Yeah, over to you, Chun Hao.
So actually, we still got time for one more question. Do you all have any questions that you all want to answer?
I saw a question about position in MOH. How does this work, and how do you balance your work? Yeah, so I do currently double head at MOH. It's not, I don't see it as two separate jobs where, you know, I spend like morning in MOH and afternoon in OGP. It doesn't quite work that way. But a lot of what I do is squarely in the intersection of healthcare and technology. So the projects that I work on, a lot of them have to do with healthcare, right? So it helps that you know, we work more closely with our MOH counterparts, and I'm part of that team there. So that's just one of the arrangements that both agencies sort of agreed on. Not quite the typical route, but how I balance it is to make sure I just maximize the synergy between the two agencies and do work that are impactful. So you can say no to, so it makes it easier to say no to meetings that maybe don't contribute very much to the work I'm working on. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I think it's been a very enlightening fireside chat with our speakers, learning about their experiences in the public sector and the differences between the private sector and the public sector, the purpose that OGP has, and how they are creating products that suit the needs of the people. I think on that note, I think that's the end of our fireside chat. I hope you all enjoyed this fireside chat and have a good night. Bye-bye.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. It almost feels like real life where we are kind of waiting for everybody to leave as if they shuffle out of the physical room. And
yeah, I might actually go have my dinner.
Yeah, I'll probably have to have dinner as well. So I will hop off first.
Yep, see you guys.
Okay.
Thanks for
See
having
you.
us.
Bye-bye.
Good evening.
Bye.
Bye.